Yeah, we're going to start off talking about the Reform UK conference. Reform UK are having their conference, so it'd be rude not to talk about it, and all the ways in which Nigel Farage and the crew are screwing over their supporters. But I'm going to start off with something. You may have to protect your ears a little bit. Some of you may have seen this. I just want to start off with this. I've had to listen to it, so you can listen to a little, just a snippet. This is just a snippet. I'm not, you know, the European Convention on Human Rights still holds here.
I'm an insomniac. I'm an insomniac. Staring at the ceiling. Waiting for my phone to switch off. Yes, I'm an insomniac.
Andrea Jenkyns came on singing. Now, here's the thing. There's a few things I want to say about this first bit. The first is, so before the conference, ahead of the conference, Reform UK were saying that, and they were saying this proudly, this is something to be proud of, that they are the only party whose conference has a pyrotechnics budget. And you think to yourself, why would you be proud of that? Right? Now, okay, I'm not knocking. If you want to put a bit of razzmatazz into it, that's fine. If that's what your supporters want, I'm not taking issue with that as such. But the way I look at it, in fact, John's just said it there, they're not serious. This is the thing, isn't it? Why do they have a pyrotechnics budget? Why did Andrea Jenkyns go on singing? Actually, there's two reasons why she went on singing. But the main reason is they haven't got anything to say. They've got no detail. There's nothing behind them. So they're just distraction monkeys. That's what Reform UK are. They're distraction monkeys. They're clowns. They're performers. And the thing is, if you vote in a load of performers into government, you're going to get a circus. It's really that simple. Now, just thinking about Andrea Jenkyns for a moment, though, because you think to yourself, so why did, like, Nigel Farage didn't come on singing. I'll tell you what, when Nigel Farage did come on, though, a couple of things about that. First of all, he likes to talk, like Donald Trump, he's very similar. In fact, someone on a comment on one of my videos, I think from yesterday or the day before, did actually say Farage is just Trump with a better vocabulary. I hope he isn't, because the last thing we need is a bloody Trump in charge. I'm actually hoping Farage isn't as bad as Trump. But like Trump, they've got a lot of things in common. Like Trump, Farage likes to claim that he's the head of this massive popular movement. And it's not enough for him to be able to say, look, we're leading in the polls, right? That would be enough for most party leaders. It's not enough for him. He has to claim that, like, he represents 98% of the country or something. Everyone apart from the woke liberal elite, of which, of course, he is a senior member. And, well, not that he's very liberal, mind you. But this happened with Trump as well. He'd talk about the fact, you know, oh, he couldn't find a stadium big enough to get everyone in that wanted to come. And yet there were always plenty of empty seats. Same thing here. This is the Reform UK conference yesterday when Nigel Farage was speaking. During his speech, keynote speech, big event. If you've sold out, that's when your seats are full. Don't look full to me. What's wrong? Were those the seats for the incontinent Reform UK supporters? Did they all have to dash to the bogs at the same time? Was this after? Because I haven't been watching it, I have to say. I've been a bit ill yesterday and today. Last thing I need is to actually be watching the Reform UK conference. So I don't know the order that these things happen. I'm just like following journalists and grabbing useful snippets. But was it just after Andrea Jenkyns started singing maybe? Maybe that's why they had to leave or something. Maybe that's why there's all the empty seats there. But the Andrea Jenkyns singing, right? So it's because she was a bit of a performer in her youth. She was, you look at her wiki page, when she was a teenager, she was in the Miss UK contest. She was trained as a singer, you know, so I'm not disparaging the quality of her singing. The song itself, by the way, she wrote those lyrics. Brilliant, isn't she? Stu is there saying, when Jenkyns was speaking, the camera panned out near the end. The arena was about, what was that? I can't read that. 2/3 empty, is that? Yeah, okay. But, I mean, even Farage, loads of seats empty when Farage was speaking. So it's like, yeah, come on, mate. Come on. But there's no doubt they're leading in the polls. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So he could easily claim that, this popular movement now. But it's the fact that he tries to say, oh, yeah, I can't find anywhere big enough to ram them all in. It's like, mate, you can't actually even fill the seats. And there's usually only a few thousand at those sort of venues. That venue's probably only got a seating capacity of about somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000. Couldn't even fill those. But Andrea Jenkyns, anyway, so I think she's a bit of a frustrated performer. I think that's why she came on singing. No one else came on singing. I can understand, the pyrotechnics and stuff, dazzle the supporters, distract them from the fact you haven't got anything to say. And they haven't had anything to say as far as I can tell. Certainly I've not seen anything reported other than Nigel Farage having to own up to a few things, but we'll come to that in a minute. And I think to myself, is because, she has trained as a singer. She's even taught music, I think. So she's had a bit of a musical background, but she couldn't get into showbiz. She was a retail worker. I mean, she did all right in it. She got into management positions. She did all right for herself. But if you're a performer at heart, retail's not really for you, is it? It's not really for you. The closest you can get, and you could see, I remember when I was at university in Manchester, and sometimes the Disney store, do you remember the Disney store, like the Warner Brothers store, but the Disney store I'm thinking in particular, sometimes the staff, they would be in like costume and they'd do little performances. And I thought to myself, that's what happens to you if you want to be a performer, but all you can do is get a job in retail. And you could see the soul breaking in their eyes. And I think that's Jenkyns, but she didn't work at the Disney store, so she didn't get to do any of that. So she's so she entered politics so she could do a bit of performing, right? So she was loving it. And I would say, beware of frustrated performers, beware of frustrated artists, because we all know what happened with Hitler, don't we? Because no one would put up his paintings in galleries, he decided to murder a load of Jews and invade Europe. If only someone would have bought a couple of his paintings and put them up in the bogs or something, we might have been able to deal away with all that nonsense. So beware frustrated artists. Wasn't Pol Pot an artist? Wasn't he a writer or something? Or have I got that wrong? I think you need to watch these people. Keith Ed said it was a rally, not a conference. No debates or membership votes on policy, as far as I can tell. Now, I think they do have a panel, because Jacob Rees-Mogg's on it. So I think they might have a couple of panels. But yeah, I've not seen any reports of any, it's not like a normal conference. So you could be right there. It is basically a rally and not a particularly good one. But, so, just before I go on to actually Nigel Farage, one last thing on Andrea Jenkyns. And this doesn't show just how thick she is, but also how thick Reform UK supporters are. They claim to be patriotic, right? They claim to be patriotic. Now, what are they going to do, right? You've got Andrea Jenkyns. Some of you already know this, won't you? You've got Andrea Jenkyns there, right? She's come on singing for her thing, right? She's done some more singing today. Now, for a patriotic party, what do you think she sang? What do you think she sang? You know what she sang. She sang the national anthem. Only she didn't, did she? Right? Saw this tweet. It came with a video on it. It came with a video, but this is the you'll have to trust me on this one, because I'm not showing you that as well. Andrea Jenkyns sings God Save the Queen at the Reform UK conference. God Save the Queen. Doesn't she remember her boss killed the Queen? So the national anthem now is God Save the King. So they can't even get the national anthem right. And let's be honest, our national anthem is really simple. The British national anthem, it's dead easy. It's such easy lyrics. You don't forget. I haven't sung it for years. You don't forget it. Simple. How do you get that wrong? The key word in the whole thing as well. The key word. And she couldn't get it right. And the rest of them, no one booed it or anything. No one came up to her and said, Andrea, she's dead. We've got a king now, don't you remember? 3 years ago, almost to the day. It was nearly almost to the day, because it was early September, 3 years ago, that a combination of Boris Johnson and Liz Truss killed the Queen. Right? Does she not remember? Was it the Sex Pistols version? No, it wasn't. No, I don't think they're into punk rock, if I'm honest. Breaking news, Farage to force Charlie into a transition. Yes, that's a good point, yeah. Yeah, are they assuming his gender? Oh dear. And they're saying, I'm both a frustrated creative and frustrated ND person on UC and PIP. From what you've been saying, things don't bode well, do they? I mean, they bode a lot better than they did 6 months ago. But if you mean in terms of after the next election, I mean, I've still got faith. I've still got some faith, because they are utter clowns. They honestly are. They're clowns. So let's have a look at some other things, right? So, Nigel Farage, let's get on to him. Let's forget about Andrea Jenkyns. Even though she didn't just show up her own stupidity, but the whole conference. Those Reform UK supporters there, if they don't know their own national anthem, are they really patriot? Not that you need to know your own anthem to be a patriot. Some anthems are actually quite complicated, right? There's a lot of people ours is simple. Ours is, so if you want to make a big thing of being a patriot, there's no excuse for not knowing the British national anthem because it's really basic. Some anthems are more complicated. But go through a few things, right? Nigel Farage having a pop at Angela Rayner over stamp duty. Bosh. This is in the Mirror. Nigel Farage didn't pay 44. So Angela Rayner, and it's quite clear she's inadvertently avoided £40,000. She is going to pay it, by the way. There's no serious question that it was intentional at all. Nigel Farage, 44,000 stamp duty, and then moans about Angela Rayner. Now, how did he do this? Let's get the next one. Because this is what he said. He's admitted that he was wronged. Because what he'd said is he'd moved to Clacton. He doesn't go to Clacton. He hasn't moved to Clacton, just to be clear. But he would move to Clacton. So he was going to buy a house in Clacton. Didn't buy a house. Claimed he'd bought a house. Hadn't bought a house. His partner had bought a house. Why? Tax dodge, right? I'm guessing, I haven't read into this, I'm guessing that she would have to pay less stamp duty because she does, if he owns his house wherever it is in like Kent, or wherever it is, I don't know where actually he lives. I just know he doesn't live in Clacton. He's more likely to live next door to me than Clacton. And that would be fun. Wouldn't it be fun if Nigel Farage... Because some people would think, oh, wouldn't it be terrible if Nigel Farage moved next door to you? I would think, no, it'd be hilarious. I'd love it. I would love it. Oh, the conversations we could have. But anyway, so I'm guessing he owns his own gaff in Kent, or wherever it is, and his partner lives with him, and so therefore she doesn't need to own anything, but she's got money. So she bought it so she'd get the lower rate of stamp duty. But that's a deliberate fiddle. Angela Rayner wasn't trying to fiddle it. She genuinely thought, and had the proof that she genuinely thought, that she didn't have any stake in any property in the country and therefore she'd pay the lower rate of stamp duty. Farage knew. He knew that he would have to pay a higher rate of stamp duty, so got his partner to get it. Well, why don't you get it? Because they can always sell it afterwards. It's not like she'll lose money and pay the lower rate of stamp duty. That's what it is. But listen to what Nigel Farage said. So this is how it's reported. So Nigel Farage admits he's wrong to say he'd bought the house in Clacton. So he says, I shouldn't have said we. I should have said she. Yeah, you should have done. Why isn't he asked why? Why did he lie? Because that's not a slip of the tongue. He lied, right? It's her money, he said. It's her asset. I own none of it. But I just happened to spend some time there. Not live there, notice. He claims he bought it so he could live in Clacton. So he's not even now claiming he lives in Clacton, just spend some time there. Yeah, 45 minutes every 2 months when he has to sort of pretend he's going to Clacton. And then Farage added, he said, you know what, it's a really funny thing in life, but sometimes we all say things we perhaps shouldn't have said. He's saying that like it's a mistake, not a deliberate lie. It should have been correct. I'll correct that. Farage said, you know what? It's a really funny thing in life. Sometimes we tell porky pies and we shouldn't do. That's what he should have said. And then he says, I should have rephrased it. I didn't want to put her in the public domain. So now he's claiming he just didn't want to put the spotlight on her. Absolute bollocks. What bollocks? Put the spotlight on her. You're not putting the spotlight on someone by saying, oh, my partner's bought that house. No, because the reason why... If he'd have said she'd bought it, I'll tell you why he didn't want to say she'd bought it, because first thing a journalist would say is, why didn't you buy it? Because that's the question that should still come to him. Why didn't he buy it? It's for his purposes. His partner didn't want to go to Clacton. He didn't want to go to Clacton. He still doesn't want to go to Clacton. What purpose? She's bought that so he can use it when he has to disappear to Clacton every now and then, and he needs to escape from the locals. He's probably got a portcullis. Has anyone seen it? I bet it's got a moat and a drawbridge. Keep the peasants out. But why didn't he buy it? And that should still be the question 9. Never mind the fact you lied. Why didn't you buy it? Why did she buy it and not you? That's a tax dodge, exactly as the Mirror explained there. Other things that have come up, right? GB News. This came up in The Guardian, right? They've worked out, and this is based on his declarations, because he has to declare income, right, as an MP. So based on his own declarations, he's getting £2,000 an hour from GB News, right? £2,000 an hour. Now, as it says here, I'll read it out to you. The Reform UK leader diverts money from his primetime TV show into his company, which is fine, by the way. But because that company is based offshore, it says, which means that he only paid 25% corporation tax on profits instead of 40% income tax and could offset some expenses. The expenses I don't mind. If you've got expenses, you've got expenses. I have expenses, right? That's fine. But it's the fact he's been paid by GB News to be a presenter, right? That's income. That should be his income tax. Yes, you take off the money he has to pay for his staff. He has a business. He sort of has a business arrangement. He has staff. He has his chauffeur, doesn't he? He has his bodyguards. All right, I don't know who's paying for them, but assuming he pays them, okay, deduct the money for that. Anything that's related to the GB News stuff only, by the way. Otherwise, that's not a relevant expense. But whatever you can deduct as an expense, no problem. But by only paying 25% tax instead of 40%, so he's dodging, that means £300 an hour tax. He's actually avoiding £300 an hour tax. Can you imagine even getting paid £300 an hour? Who gets paid? Not many people get even paid £300 an hour. That's not even how much tax he's paying. That's how much tax he's avoiding. He's paying, what, £500 an hour in tax. But he's dodging £300. But here's the thing, before I come on to some comments. So let's look at that. Now, 12 years ago, he got into a bit of a thing with tax avoidance because he'd been caught using a trust, offshore trust to dodge tax, right? I'll read out the bit of the BBC article. This is from 2013. UK Independence Party leader, this is 2013, remember, it's UKIP then. Leader Nigel Farage said he felt uncomfortable about setting up a trust fund in the Isle of Man. Not uncomfortable enough not to do it, you notice. But insisted he did not avoid or evade tax. He bloody well did. Avoided it, by the way. I'm not saying anything that was illegal about it. The MEP told the BBC that he opened the fund in 2003 to reduce his family's inheritance tax bills. That's avoiding tax. He says he didn't do it to avoid tax. Then he says he did it to avoid tax. This man cannot be consistent for a moment, right? I'm going to say to his supporters, this man is not consistent. He is lying to you all the time. Yesterday in his speech, he said within 2 weeks there'd be no more what he calls illegal immigrants. He means asylum seekers, right, in Britain. After taking over, 2 weeks later, Tory Kunsberg interviews him and then he has to say, oh no, I didn't mean that. So he goes back on it immediately. He tells his crowd, I get elected Prime Minister. His government gets elected. He's made Prime Minister, right? 2 weeks later, there's no more asylum seekers in this country, right? That's what he says. Then he gets asked a question. And she's really gentle with him. She's like, she loves him because her views are shite, by the way. Her views went down. After Andrew Marr left, the views of that show went down. So she's not pulling the views in. So she needs him for views. So she always gives him softball questions. Even she caught him out. He said, by the way, he tried to change it to, oh no, I meant 2 weeks after the laws are passed. And she was trying to say things like, oh, but it could take months to pass these laws. Months? It would take years to pass the laws he's talking about. He's actually, I'll tell you something. The laws he's trying to change will destroy the Good Friday Agreement. Doesn't matter how much he tries to deny it. It will destroy the Good Friday Agreement. Even, put it this way, okay, we don't know the direction MAGA's going in. I'm going to suggest even Trump wouldn't let him destroy the Good Friday Agreement. The EU certainly won't. The EU will certainly not. Well, there's just to cut a little segue in here. Will Rayner get a ministerial post again during this parliament, or is this it for a ministerial career? No, it's not. It depends what she wants. I mean, some people, you've got to think about the hounding that Angela Rayner's had to put up with. It's utterly misogynistic. These Tories, they can't stand women who seem a bit, intelligent. That's why they're fine with people like Kemi Badenoch and Priti Patel and Nadine Dorries and stuff like that. They're fine with them because they're thick as mince. They hate intelligent women, but an intelligent working class woman who's in their face, they absolutely hate it. So she may, sometimes you find when women have been at the top end of politics and then something puts them out, they decide they can't be arsed with it anymore. But if she wants to carry on with it, there's no reason not to come back. And yes, potentially this parliament. What I would say is the limiting factor will be, can Labour restore their popularity? Because if they stay in the doldrums in the polls, it makes no sense to do anything that could be controversial. If you're going to do something where you risk a political, because they'll bring it straight back. If she's brought back into cabinet, the press will bring this straight back. It'll be utterly hypocritical. Remember, Peter Mandelson, he did worse than her twice and came back. Priti Patel literally committed treason. She got sacked for treason and then was made Home Secretary a couple of years later. So there's absolutely precedent for top political performers shitting the bed, taking a bit of a sabbatical and then coming back. She could easily be back in 2 years' time. I'm not saying again, it depends on the political situation, but there's no reason. If things start going better for Labour in a couple of years, she could easily be brought back. Yeah, there's nothing about this says that's it for Angela Rayner. That'd be an absolute nonsense. If she wants to come back, she'll be able to come back, no problem at all. Anyway, I'll carry on reading this thing. So, because Nigel Farage, remember, going back to 2013. Sorry, I've just distracted you all. So he said he felt uncomfortable about setting up that trust, but it wasn't to avoid tax. But then he says it was to avoid inheritance tax. Then he said, the article said, this wasn't a quote from him, such funds were no longer appropriate for politicians, he suggested. So in 2013, he's basically saying offshore trusts are not appropriate. It's not appropriate for politicians in this day and age. It's a bit dodgy. It's tax avoidance, Politicians should pay their proper share of tax. That's what he was saying in 2013. It's not what he does, is it? It's not what he does. He's not the only one in Reform UK who's been caught doing this as well. Richard Tice got caught out, didn't he? Look at it. Absolute state of it. Anyway, I'll catch up with some comments because I've been missing them out. Thoughts of Farage saying we could have a general election in 2027. See, that's another one where he's conning his supporters. No, we couldn't. Right? Or no, we won't. We won't actually have an election in 2027. So he said, and I'll just make sure we're clear about why he said it. He said this government is falling apart so quickly we could easily have an election in 2027. If the government actually fell apart, you are definitely not getting an election until 2029, right? I mean, even if you don't understand why that is, you just have to look to the last parliament. The Conservative government fell apart. They had 3 prime ministers in the space of 2 months. Did they have an early election? Did that cause an election? No, it didn't. It meant they held on to the last minute. That's what happens. If the government's in trouble, you never get an early election. The government names the date for the election. It's up to the Prime Minister. The Constitution, it used to be different. It used to be different when we had, when David Cameron passed the, I've completely forgotten the name of the pissing act now because they got rid of it. The Parliament, no, not the Parliament now, that's still there. What's it called? I've completely forgotten it now. But that set parliamentary terms. I've forgotten the name of the bloody legislation. It's because it didn't really, but it didn't last. But now that the Tories repealed it, so now it's back. Fixed Parliament Act. Thank you very much, Pronata. That was it. So So now it's up to Starmer when there's I mean, yeah, Parliament can trigger one if they want. Absolutely, Parliament can do whatever it likes. If Parliament wants to have a vote to trigger an early election, of course it can do. But given that they're not going to, because most of them are, like, if Labour were on for a hiding in the election, why would they vote to bring that? Why would they vote to bring their sacking day early? You wouldn't. That'd be a stupid thing to do. This is, and Nigel Farage knows that. That's him again. He's treating his supporters like idiots. And after them listening to God Save the Queen and thinking that's the national anthem, I'm tempted to agree with him. But nonetheless, absolute nonsense. If Labour, right, are in a bad position in 2027, the election will be in 2029. Absolutely guaranteed. It will be not necessarily the last possible day, but it will be the last possible year, right? Because they'll still try and pick a window when they've got their best chance, like Sunak tried to with the Tories, right? But they will, because that wasn't the last possible day it could have been, but it was pretty much the last, it was 4.5 years out of a 5-year possibility. In terms of when the election will actually be, if Labour are looking good in 2028, it will be in 2028, because you always have the election. If you think you're going to win a decent majority, doesn't have to be as big a majority. As long as you think you can get a working majority, a decent working majority, after 4 years, you go after 4 years, because something could go wrong in the 5th year. And, you know, I mean, we're facing global uncertainty on all sorts of fronts at the moment. You would not risk an extra year. So Labour, if they're looking good for the election win in 2028, they'll have it in 2028. If they're not looking good for the election win, it'll be 2029. It's really that simple. That's just basic. Anyone who understands anything. So Nigel Farage, by saying that, is basically admitting that his supporters know nothing, not even the basics about how elections work. And a lot of people don't, I suppose. But, you know, these are people. Remember, the people at that conference, they're not just ordinary Reform UK supporters. They're the ones who've paid to go to a political conference, right? So it's not the average man or woman on the street. These are politically interested people because they've paid to attend a political event. They've probably travelled, got a hotel, some of them, right? Because is it in Birmingham? Can't remember. Is it in Birmingham? Someone, sorry, tell me. I'm not actually sure where it is. The last one was in Birmingham, I think. But but they'll have certainly had to travel. It's not in Clacton, I'll tell you that much. It wasn't on the pier. But there we go. Punator there saying, I think Sunak legit wanted an autumn election, but the data leak forced his hand. It may have been any number of things, but I still say it would have done them no good to have exposed the failure of the Rwanda plan. The Rwanda plan was failing. If he'd have had an autumn election, it would have been, the Tories would have had nowhere to go on it. Richard there saying, yeah, it was in Brum. There we go. So not a lot of Reform UK supporters will live in Birmingham. So they've had to travel, right? They'll have had to travel. Liam there saying, Netherlands not short of its issues, its own problems, but it's clear the money in government and taxes are used in the system properly. Everything works, efficient, lovely and safe place. Yes. Not here. And not if we get Nigel Farage in charge. I mean, there's so many things wrong with it before. Absolutely. It's the one thing you can say about Thatcher, she was intelligent evil. This lot, I don't think so. No. But when it comes to Thatcher, right, let's remind, because this is something that needs to come back. So do people remember what this was ahead of the 1987 election? 1987 general election. That was after 4 years, because Thatcher thought she was on for a win, and she did win, right? Because that's what you do. If you're on for a win, you hold your election 4 years, right? You don't wait for the 5th year, it might all go to shit. So 1987, general election. Neil Kinnock, Labour leader, he said something, didn't he? Do you remember what it was? It was quite a long speech, but the end of it was this. He was warning them about the dangers of letting Thatcher back in, right? And he said, and this applies to Nigel Farage as well. This needs to come back because the same warning will apply to Nigel Farage, who, remember, is a massive fan of Thatcher. I warn you not to be ordinary. I warn you not to be young. I warn you not to fall ill. I warn you not to get old. Because otherwise you're screwed. Yeah, I added the last bit. Those things will be very, very true if Nigel Farage finds him anywhere near Downing Street. Other than to hand in a petition. I don't mind him going to Downing Street to hand in his performative petitions every now and then. Parental, they're saying, I agree Rwanda would have failed, but I also think Sunak believed it could work. It would work. You can't fix stupid. It might explain why I cleverly mentioned bringing it back. The thing is, they're free to say they'd bring it back because they don't have to. Right? The Tories have a long history of claiming they'll do things and then just quietly not doing them, and no one seems to notice because the media don't point it out. The media don't point it out. The media have spent years trying to get something on Angela Rayner. They've really been spending the last year trying to get something on her, particularly to do with her financial dealings with housing. Couldn't get anything on her and they only got lucky with this one. Because when they first started reporting this stamp duty thing, they didn't actually realise they had anything at all. Because the way they initially reported on it, remember, they actually had to emphasise she hadn't broken any rules. So they didn't realise she'd broken any rules when they first started reporting on it. They just got lucky that it just happens that she had inadvertently. If Farage had the Reform conference in Clacton, it would have brought a lot of money to their local economy. Why didn't he? He has that power. And I don't know, Clacton. If we're going to be fair, it may be that they don't have a conference centre. I was going to say don't have a suitable conference centre, but again, judging by the fact that when he did have a suitable conference centre, he couldn't fill it up. Maybe it would have been fine on the pier of Clacton. But if we're going to be fair, it may be that he doesn't have that Clacton doesn't have a conference centre. But you are right. If it turns out it does have I've never heard of a big event at Clacton, so I'm going to guess it doesn't. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to build a conference centre anywhere that's going to be a suitable size, you need to get regular business. So it may be that. Oh, you say Kinnock said it in 1983. Did he? Oh, did I get that wrong? Sorry. My apologies. It was at least Kinnock that said it, though, about Thatcher. He must not have said that as the leader then. Because Michael Foot would have been leader then. What do I think is the risk of a Reform UK government, as it's worrying what I've been hearing is out of Orban's playbook? I wouldn't over-egg it just yet. So in terms of the factors that we do not yet know. So there are good and bad factors from my point of view. I suppose they'd be flipped, good and bad, if you're a Reform UK supporter. So in terms of the hopeful signs, Labour's Workers' Rights Bill should be passed very soon now. The Renters' Rights Bill also should be passed very soon now. They do have to send some things back to the Lords with the Employment Rights Bill because they tried to water it down. But nonetheless, that should now go through without any great fuss. The Renters' Rights Bill, some of those provisions come in straight away, other ones will come in over time. Basically, over next year, by April 2027, all of the provisions in the Renters' Rights Bill and the Employment Rights Bill, or the acts as they will be after a couple of weeks, will be in law and people will be benefiting from them. The house building, Steve Reed's taken over that now. We have to hope that he gets on the ball very quickly. But that, hopefully, that's now a fingers crossed thing. But hopefully that carries on at speed. Ed Miliband, hopefully in a couple of years. Again, I say, for me, 2027 is the key year for Labour. That's not to say that it doesn't matter what happens in 2026. They do need to start pushing back a bit. But 2026 is more about communications, which has been terrible. 2027 is delivery time. For some things, not everything. Some of it is long term, right? Some of it, Reform UK will benefit from and claim credit for. That's the problem with putting in That's why you don't get a lot of long-term thinking with governments, because it's like, why would we stump up? Why would we find money in the budget to produce something that a future government's going to take credit for? That's your problem with democracy. It's a problem China don't have, but it is still better to have democracy, isn't it? But that is nonetheless a downside to it. But yeah, so there will be delivery. It is possible that Labour will get better at communicating. I mean, that's a hope more than expectation. And also, you know, what happens in America will have echoes here. If people start to see the absolute shit show of MAGA America, then, you know, that could affect things. So we will just have to, at the moment, Farage is openly, you know, backing Trump and tying himself to Trump and stuff like that. That could bite him on the arse. So there's things that could bite them on the arse. Also, the more councils they win, the more councillors they win, the more opportunities there are to highlight just how useless they are. Again, there's going to come a point where the media thinks it's reasonable to look at what these Reform UK councils have actually done. Okay, so there are headwinds for Reform UK, but we also have to be honest, there are pitfalls as well. Labour's communications are terrible, and I have no faith that they're going to get better. I hope they do, but I have no faith that they will. The other problem is that, so if we look at like trans issues, okay, so why did Labour under Starmer flip? Like they did a proper 180 on trans issues from trans allies, and then there was that little point in 2023 when it was like they went cool on it a bit, which I thought was strategic. I did say at the time I thought that was strategic. Wasn't strategic. And now they're full on transphobes. What did that? What did it was the fact that if you look at polling, YouGov had some polling out earlier this year, and transphobic attitudes have massively increased in Britain literally over the last 2 years. Over the last 2 years has been a massive, across lots of demographics and especially the key demographics. And so you look at that and you think to yourself, that doesn't excuse it, by the way, because again, I keep saying saliency matters. And I don't think Labour are polling saliency. But nonetheless, that's what's done it. And then you think to yourself, the public view right now, public opinion on various issues right now, is not necessarily how it will be in 2028, 2029. The far right are really organised and they've been pushing lots of things. We may end up in a situation where, if anything, even more, if you think about some of the things Nigel Farage is able to say, even the Tories are able to say now, that they would not have dared say in public 10 years ago, because it's proper. 10 years ago, people would have called it out as BNP rhetoric, right? BNP rhetoric from the 70s and 80s. Nowadays, it's mainstream. What might be mainstream in 2028, 2029? Are we going to be able to push back? Because Labour are not pushing very back. I mean, Wangi Pagans mentioned Blue Labour there. You say it's Blue Labour that did it. Yes, but at the same time, they needed some ammunition, didn't they? The ammunition was the polling, right? They didn't just go up to Keir Starmer, who, you know, let's be honest, has got a lifetime achievement of sticking up for the underdog. I mean, let us not forget, representing striking minors for free, right? When the NUM couldn't pay for everyone, he represented them for free. He helped out in the McLibel case. You know, he went around the world with Amnesty International persuading governments not to execute people. You know, he really went after on the phone hacking scandal. So, you know, he's got basically a lifetime as a lawyer of sticking up for the little guy, right? So Blue Labour didn't go to Keir Starmer and go, we've got this great idea, why don't we shit on everyone? Why don't we shit on minorities? And he went, oh, great idea, I've always wanted to do that. That's obviously not how it happened. You know, it's based on polling. So you just think to yourself, where's that polling going to be on some issues at the next election? You know, so the country basically in terms of public attitude could be in an even worse position. There might be some things that even now, even Nigel Farage wouldn't say right now. Because remember, like Nigel Farage, for example, he has to distance himself from people like Tommy Robinson. He's even had to sack the odd racist Reform UK councillor. You remember the Epping protests? So he was all about the Epping protests and he promoted them and stuff like that, right? But he still had to sack a Reform UK councillor at the Epping protest because he was a bit too racist. So there are things now that Nigel Farage has to pretend to be moderate on. Even now, you might think he's really extreme. There's way worse could come, right? Imagine the next election, right? Or even a couple of years' time. Imagine we're in 2027, 2028. Imagine that public attitudes have become, have shifted even further to the sort of culture wars, on the culture wars. Let's imagine that Advance UK, which is supposed to be their rival Limpet, backed by Elon Musk. Let's say they're getting some traction. I'm not sure I believe they will, by the way, but let's say they did. Just, you know, we don't know, do we? I mean, Reform UK, let us remember, in 2021 were nowhere. They were nowhere. And yet, 3 years later, they're winning MPs and, you know, the third largest share of the vote. And another year later, they're ahead in the polls. So, you know, a few years, 3 or 4 years can change things. So let's just say that maybe Advance UK, who have the backing of Tommy Robinson, who have the backing of Elon Musk and Twitter, of course, let us just imagine that they are posing a problem for Nigel Farage and public attitudes have hardened. Reform UK could become even more extreme. And we could be in trouble. We could really be in trouble. So, you know, I don't want to get people, you know, do not like be doom and gloom about this. It's a bit, I don't want to say cheer up, it may never happen, but that is sort of the sentiment. It's like, you know, there's still things to happen that are definitely going to happen in the next few years that will work against Farage. But I also have to be honest and say there may be things that happen that work in his favour as well. You know, there are things there are worrying signs and there are positive signs. And at the moment, it is unfortunately just a way of seeing which ones hold sway with the public. There was a brilliant mini documentary on Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and its effect on Aussie. It's wonderful. Well, we saw a similar thing recently here. We know sometimes things can tap into the to the consciousness, like that drama on the Horizon scandal, the post office scandal. That affected politics. That changed public attitudes, and that had a political effect. So these things can happen. But there it is. John, they're saying Mahmoud at the Home Office could signal a new approach to stopping boats like processing centre in northern France. So there is likely to be a significant direction at the Home Office. I'll tell you why. It's not just because the Home Secretary's been changed. All of the Home Office ministers have. There's been an entire clear out because they've been reshut. Now they did the cabinet yesterday and a few junior ministers. Today they've been doing junior ministers, right? So it looks like all of the Home Office ministers of 2 days ago are gone. So it's literally all change at the Home Office. So yes, that does suggest a big change. I'd like to think, because Mahmoud is pragmatic, right? She's not everyone's cup of tea because she's been happy to go along with some of the things people do accuse her of. It's a bit like Wes Street, and I have to say, who I'm going to bring up in a moment, you have to remember what they say as ministers is not necessarily their own personal views. Now, again, you can still take the view, it doesn't matter, they're still saying it, and that's fine. But remember, they're just towing the party line. It's ministerial responsibility. So general party positions are decided in 10 Downing Street. It's the leadership that decides those. It's ultimately Keir Starmer's responsibility. Even given that I think he's getting bad advice, it's still his fault, right? It's still his responsibility. But Mahmoud is pragmatic. So it is possible she will argue for a pragmatic solution to the boats problem, that she will say, look, we ain't going to stop it with this, this, and this. If you want to stop it, we need safe routes. So maybe. I just hold out no great hope. Now, speaking of Street, because I will say another thing. So when I said before, and again, sorry, it's a bit of a pessimistic viewpoint, but the fact that Nigel Farage could get more extreme over the next few years if public opinion becomes more extreme. Because remember, at the moment, he's trying to appeal to that big block of relatively moderate voters who've been knocked off course by the media. If that relatively large block of moderate voters becomes more extreme, he can become more extreme. And I'll show you an example of it. Few years, when Reform UK rebranded from the Brexit Party, so after Brexit, they became Reform UK. They were struggling, like I said. They were nowhere in the polls. They were basically level pegging with UKIP because they were still going somehow. Going through leaders quicker than the Tories, right? And they needed a hook. Now, the thing that gave them the hook was the small boats issue. But before then, they needed something. They were struggling to find one. The obvious one, if they wanted a culture war at the time, late 2020, early 2021, the obvious one was dipping into slagging off the COVID vaccine, right? Anti-vaccine, right? But they didn't. No, they were supporters of the vaccine. Why? Because Donald Trump was a supporter of the vaccine, which he still is, by the way. Now, this is where it gets interesting. At the conference, the Reform UK conference, they had an anti-vaxxer saying that COVID, in fact, I'll read out the tweet here, quote, "It's highly likely that the COVID vaccines have been a significant factor in the cancers of members of the royal family," says Dr. Asim Malhotra on the main stage at Reform Party conference, which is bollocks, of course, by the way, just to be clear. They're leaning into anti-vax. Why are they leaning into anti-vax? They wouldn't do a few years ago when it was trendy, and they needed a hook a few years ago. They wouldn't do it then. Why? Why are they doing it now? I'll be honest, I don't know. Because although you might look at it and say, Phil, but, you know, Trump's government's getting rid of vaccine mandates. I mean, they're already getting rid of it in Florida and stuff like that. And, you know, RFK Jr. has been, he's been attacking it. He's been sacking people who support vaccines. It's a terrible mess. And it's like, all that is true. But Donald Trump last week also tweeted on Truth Social about his support for vaccines and how great they are. He's losing control of his own government, basically. But Donald Trump is still a supporter of vaccines, publicly. So why is Farage leaning into anti-vaxxer? Because that's putting him at odds with Trump. So I genuinely don't know. But this is what Wes Streeting said about it. He says, with falling numbers of parents getting their children vaccinated, which is true, and a resurgence of disease we'd previously eradicated because of the lower rates of vaccines, it's shockingly irresponsible for Farage to give a platform to these poisonous lies, which is 100% true. Anyway, going to Lammy here. We're going to flip about topics in the last 10 minutes by the looks of it. Lammy's demotion to Justice Secretary is grossly unfair. Has been instrumental in maintaining good links with the US, EU. Also, I will keep emphasising he has good relationships with several countries in the global south as well. Absolutely crucial to us. Particularly as the world is becoming more polarised. Trump is making it more polarised. We need good... We want to... The UK wants to avoid that polarisation. So we need good relationships with the global south. So it's not about unfair, though. You say it's grossly unfair. I don't view these things as fair or not, because a ministerial position should not be seen as a reward at all. You should put the best people in the best positions. If it's unfair on anyone, it's unfair on the country, because David Lammy, yes, he was not only very experienced, he's got the personality for it as well. Yvette Cooper, she's a bit like me. She's a bit sort of severe, resting bitch face all the time. She's not going to be good at making strong relations around the world. But the thing is, like, Lammy'd already done it. He'd already proven. It's not even like there's a particularly important country where they don't like Lammy. Like, they love him even on Capitol Hill and in the White House now. So that was the big danger, because Lammy had said very mean things about Trump in the past. That was the danger, that Trump wouldn't like him or something. Or more important, because Lammy doesn't deal directly with Trump. He deals with Vance, right? But Vance and him get on. Now, what if Cooper doesn't get on with Vance? What if he don't get on with him? Or she don't get on with him, sorry. It's such a risk. And again, even if she does turn out to be stunning foreign secretary, she's going to have to build those relationships up while the world is currently on fire. This is like trying to train a bloody fireman while the blaze is going. But anyway. Cameron did a doge with austerity. There's no room for more. No, there absolutely isn't. Profligate councils are a Tory trope. There's not much waste. There is. You do get the odd bit, ironically, in Tory councils. Do you remember the Marble Arch Mound? Look that up if you've never heard of that. The Marble Arch Mound. That was a Tory council, just to be clear. So there is waste. There is waste, but it's not what they say it is, and it's certainly not as widespread as they say it is. What's the latest Starmer could put up? Could put up PR for general elections if it looks like they'll lose. I mean, there is no latest on it, but of course he could. Again, I mean, if I was thinking strategically, I'd be thinking 2026 they have to start working on the communications now. Their main job right now technically is the budget. They've got to get a budget or a sort of economic position that can survive. They've got to work on I think the budget last year worked on the assumption that the global economy would tick along. Even though when they announced, and admittedly when they worked on the budget, they wouldn't have known Trump was going to win. But they did know it was a threat because Starmer and Lammy, remember, started making diplomatic moves in Trump's camp before the election. So they knew it was a risk, right? But nonetheless, the budget last year was basically a budget of, we think the global economy is going to tick along for the next 5 years. And it's like, that's blown out the water. So that was a mistake. So now they've got to get a budget where they have to, they can't just think to themselves, like some people are thinking they're just going to plug this latest hole, right? That's no good. They can't just do that. They've actually now, what Rachel Reeves has had to do this summer, and she's still doing it, that's why the budget's not going to be till November. She's given herself plenty of time. She's got to work a budget now, an economic policy that actually assumes the global economy is going to do badly over the next few years. She's got to assume a global downturn. Not a full-on crash, even though that could happen. You don't plan for that, that's stupid. But she has to work on the assumption that the global economy will be worse next year and the year after at least. Right? So that's the main job now. But beyond that, for next year, their job is to improve their communicating. That has to be their top job because they can, and start talking about things, start talking about the Workers' Rights Act, it'll be the Employment Rights Act, sorry, with the Employment Rights Act 2025, the Renters' Rights Act 2025. Start talking about these things. Start nailing down that EU trade deal, right? Because remember, it's still all agreement in principle. Nail it down, get it done, get it signed for next May. Then 2027 is when delivery starts being noticed. I mean, there'll be some delivery next year. People will notice some things next year and Labour can point them out. 2027 is when there'll be things that will be really noteworthy. The best start centres at the very least. But also, if you're halfway through 2027, if we're at the same point now, 2027, 2 years' time, and there are a shitload more houses been built, then yeah, they ain't meeting that target. So 2027 is the year of, so 2026, the year of communication, 2027, year of delivery, right? If at this point in 2027, they're still in a bad place, that is the time to bring out your emergency mallet, right? That is when you hit the big red button. And that red button could be either electoral reform, or join the EU. Take your pick. Neither may happen, by the way. I'm not saying pick which one you want. I mean, pick which one you think will work best to get tactical voting on Labour's side. But that is what you've got. You'll have a promise for the following election to deliver electoral reform, or a promise to start talks to join the EU, or at least the single market. At least the single market. So if in 2027 they're still not looking good, or by this time in 2027, basically the Labour conference 2027 needs to be an absolute stormer, right? It either needs to be Starmer walking around like a Cheshire cat because he's ahead in the polls again and, climbing, in which case that's good enough for them, that'll do, or he's going to announce something massive. Got to be one or the other. You say both. Things like that can be tricky though, because both of those, by the way, will put off voters. So it's about gathering more key voters to you than you lose. I would say that, and they both have risks and they both have potential benefits. But purely as an electoral, the thing is, you wouldn't do both because then you muddle the election. The whole point of doing either of them is to make the election a one policy issue. It's to make it about a particular policy. Because Nigel Farage wants to make it about asylum or immigration in general, but he wants to make it about asylum, right? So this would be a way of Labour saying, no, it's going to be about the electoral system. And that will be hopefully somewhere where Labour are on stronger ground. But the downside to electoral reform, which I think in theory is safer than joining the EU, the downside to it is you couldn't rule out Farage promising to do the same thing, at which point you nullify it completely. Right? Other than maybe people preferring Labour to come up with that new system than Reform UK. Whereas joining the EU is something that Nigel Farage will definitely promise not to do. But what I don't think they should do is try and do what the Democrats did. The Democrats tried to make the last election about civic rights, like, you know, abortion rights, stuff like that. That was a big part of it. I don't think Labour should talk about the European Convention on Human Rights. Don't make it an election about that, because they'll lose. Because people don't get it. You know, if they start talking about how it'll destroy the UK and stuff like that, it's the same. They tried it with Brexit. People didn't believe it. And they won't believe it this time. Matthew there saying, I think Mahmood as Home Secretary is improvement. She's been more effective as Justice Secretary than Cooper as Home Secretary. I would argue, though, that Cooper has had her hands tied. Because she's been asked to deal with asylum without being able to deal with asylum. I think she's had her hands tied. I worry, I don't know, obviously, I don't know what's going on behind closed doors. I worry, Mahmood has clearly come up with very pragmatic solutions. She's impressed me. She's really, this is a problem. This is how we deal with it. Yes. Even on the ECHR, the fact that she's talking about changing the way judges, you know, the guidance, basically, the fact that she's talking about changing the guidance for it. And it's like, some people will gristle at that, and I get that, but it's like, well, what would you prefer? Do you want to cut out, if we can change the way judges domestically interpret it that isn't at odds with the actual court, the international court, why not? Because if that solves the political problem, why not? Right? If we have been interpreting it more liberally than we need to, that is a genuine political problem. That is a problem. So there we go. Puneta, could Lammy have asked for a step back for mental health reasons? Foreign affairs could have hit him harder than expected. It is. I did actually think that myself. That is because you are right. David Lammy has been open in the past about mental health problems. It's why I've thought, for example, sometimes when people talk about future leaders, I've often thought, I'm not sure David Lammy would want. I was surprised he accepted the role of Foreign Secretary, or Shadow Foreign Secretary to begin with, of course, because of that, you know. But fair play to him, he did it. So that is, I can't rule it out. I didn't mention it in the video because I thought that's just like grasping at straws a bit, because he seemed fine to me. He hasn't seemed withdrawn. He's seemed quite bubbly, even though things must get him down. You know, he's had a lot of personal attacks on him. So it is, you can't rule it out. It is actually possible. But if that was the situation, what I would still have done, I would still have left Yvette Cooper at the Home Office. As far as I'm concerned, any failings on her part are actually the government binding her hands. I wouldn't have moved Mahmood to the Foreign Office. I'd have moved her to the Housing Department, as I said this morning, and I'd have moved someone else to the Foreign Office. I'm not sure who. Apart from anything like that, it's a really involved job. You need someone who likes travelling the world. So I don't know who that would be. So Cooper is now going to be a long way from Yorkshire, quite a lot now. How do I think PR will go for us in Wales next year? I think it'll be all right. I do. I know Reform UK are going to win some seats, and they may win more seats than they would have done without it. But but they're not going to win power, so don't sweat it. We may end up with a more stable government. I mean, Wales has been pretty good. I am impressed. The reason why I almost never talk about Welsh politics is because there's nothing interesting, because they just get on with it. It's like Welsh politics is like it's what the rest of us should do. The rest of the country should really take a leaf out of Wales. But because like Mark Drayford himself, when he was speaking at a electoral reform event last year, that I was there, he made the point that Labour have been in power for forever, but they haven't had a majority government. They've always had to work with other people, and he said that's a real advantage. It says because if you compare that with like some of the problems we've had with the Labour government. Some of those problems, of course, by the fact that they haven't properly discussed things with stakeholders, including their own MPs. They've just said, this is what we're doing. No discussion. Which is like, and then there's friction, and they don't understand why there's all this friction. Whereas Mark Drayford was making the point, when you're going to need to get cross-party support, you're discussing things with people throughout the entire process. It's a way more grown-up way of doing things. So, that's why when people talk about a problem with PR, it means you'll get coalition governments. I'm really positive about coalition governments. I agree you don't want too many bit parties in them. You don't want it too many. But there's ways to deal with that. You just have a thing where you say you've got to get a minimum of 5% of the vote or something. There's ways of dealing with that. Germany does it. It's not a problem, right? You have guardrails so you don't end up like the Netherlands who have stupid numbers of parties. And a Dutch ballot paper looks like a copy of the Times. But yeah, so I'm positive about the idea of coalition governments, even though I'm party political myself, because there's that assumption you're going to have to talk to other people. So because you're going to talk to other parties, that discussion's going to be made public. So it's a much more open process. The Welsh politics is not dramatic because of that. It's because of that. It's not because Welsh people are a different breed to everyone else in Britain. It's because their politics basically demands it. In a way that even in Scotland, where they've had to sort of, the SNP have tended to run a minority government rather than, they had a bit of an alliance with Sturgeon towards the end there, but mostly they've still just tried to run as a one-party thing. But it's worse, of course, it's actually probably worse in Stormont, if we're honest, but that's a completely different issue. But it's worse in Westminster, where you tend to have a majority government, because then the Prime Minister just thinks they can just rule from on high. And it's like, no, you should, even though you can do that, you should still talk to people. You should still talk these things out. Stop, come out your ivory tower. But there we go. Miriam Margolis, a Foreign Secretary. Should we put that in the maybe pile? I don't think we want to trigger any more international incidents, right? We're not competing with Trump. You don't get a trophy or anything. But anyway. Viv, they're saying, yes, Starmer's done well on the world stage, so much more of a leader than the previous Tories. As for Boris, well, yeah. He has done, in terms of his actual job as Prime Minister, he's done well. In terms of his job as party leader in government, massive room for improvement, because that machine is not working well. That machine's not working well. So we will just have to see if things improve. I do worry, though, that in terms of social policy, if anything, the signs are that things could get worse. But we'll leave it there anyway. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of evening. And until next time, I'll see you later.